Now that you have had the chance to see the formulas in action, I would like to introduce subtraction into the formula. This is very similar to addition, except we will be using the minus sign. I also think that this is a great opportunity to combine this lesson with the autofill feature, which we covered in a previous lesson. Autofill will not only sequence numbers, but it will do the same for formulas. I'm excited to share this with you, and I am sure you will find it beneficial. Let's dive right into this lesson. Okay, so here we are on the subtraction worksheet, and we're going to be calculating the inventory for office supplies and coffee supplies. Now I want to begin by pointing out that the paper reams started out with 25 reams. We used 15, and so what we're trying to determine here is what's the remaining balance. We will do the same for the pencils, the pens, staples, so on and so forth. Now as we move into the coffee supplies, we will be using the same method to calculate, but here is where we will use the autofill. So let's begin by placing our mouse inside of cell H3. Let's go ahead and click the equal sign to notify Excel that we will be doing the formula calculation. Now, let's go ahead and click cell F3. Next, let's click the minus sign. Let's go ahead and click cell G3. Now let's go ahead and say enter. So our ending inventory in this case is 10. Okay, and so next I would like to repeat this process for the pencils, pens, staples, and the remaining inventory for office supplies. So let's begin by placing our mouse inside of cell H4. Go ahead and select the equal sign. Now we want to begin by selecting the starting inventory, which is in cell F4. So remember, we are referencing cells and not the number. So let's select F4. And as you look up at your formula bar, you will see the formula start to develop. So let's go ahead and select the minus sign. Let's select the amount used, which is 2. In this case, it would be cell G4. Again, let's look at the formula bar. So you want to pay close attention to the formula and not the content inside the cell. Now let's go ahead and select enter. And as we know, 6 minus 2 is 4. So this is calculated correctly. Let's repeat this step with pencils. We'll begin by placing our mouse inside of cell H5. Let's place our equal sign in to let Excel know that we are about to do a calculation. Next, we want to go ahead and select the starting inventory cell reference, which is in cell F5. Let's look at our formula as we can see it start to develop. Now let's go ahead and say minus. And let's select the cell that represents the used amount, which in this case will be cell G5. And again, look at your formula. Let's go ahead and select the check mark this time to complete our entry. Now I want to remind you that you can use the check mark or the enter button to complete your entry. Whichever you are most comfortable with will work. Okay, so next let's go do the same for staples. Let's place our mouse inside of cell H6. Let's create the equal sign. Let's select cell F6, which is our beginning inventory. Let's click the minus button and go ahead and select cell G6, which is the amount used. Now I'm going to go ahead and select enter, and we are left with an ending inventory of 4. Okay, so now that we are familiar with the process for subtracting with formulas, let's go ahead and complete the rest of our office supply inventory. Let's start with jumbo paper clips. Let's place our equal sign. Let's select the starting inventory, which is F7, and place the minus sign. Let's go ahead and select G7 and say enter. Let's move into the small paper clips, which is the number 1 size. Let's say equal. Let's go ahead and select cell F8. Let's place the minus sign and select the amount used, which is in cell G8, and let's go ahead and say enter. Okay, now let's do the same for the binder clips. Let's select equal. Let's select the starting inventory, which is in cell F9. Let's go ahead and say minus. Let's select the ending inventory, which is G9. Again, let's go ahead and check our formula. As you can see, it start to develop. Let's go ahead and say enter. Okay, so next for the batteries in the notepad, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the formula down. So let's begin by placing our mouse inside of cell H9. Let's do a right click and let's say copy. Now select cell H10 and H11. Let's do a right click and say paste. Now what happens here is Excel sequenced the formula. So instead of F11 minus G11, so based on sequencing, Excel assumes that you want to calculate F10 minus G10 and F11 minus G11. Okay, and this leads me into my next demo, which will be using the autofill feature. Let's begin by placing our mouse inside of cell H14. Let's say equal. Let's get the starting inventory for regular coffee, which is 4. In this case, it would be referencing cell F14. Let's say minus. Let's select the amount used, which is 2. And let's look at our formula. As you can see it develop. Let's go ahead and say enter. Now let's go ahead and select cell H14 because this time we're going to drag the formula down instead of doing it individually or instead of copying and paste. So remember we did the autofill in an earlier lesson. So we're going to go ahead and apply that here. Let's go ahead and get in the black cross mode by hovering over our cell. Now, as you can see, I am in the black cross mode now. I'm going to left click and hold, and I'm going to simply drag it all the way down, and then I'll release. And as you can see, my information is filled based on sequencing. Let's look at cell H15, and as you can see, it calculated F15 minus G15, which is the starting inventory for the decaf coffee minus the amount used. Let's look at cell H20. And as you can see, looking at your formula bar, it calculated the starting inventory for creams, which is 12, minus the amount used, which is 5, and left us with the ending inventory of 7. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this lesson. But again, I want to reiterate that knowing how to apply formulas is a must for Excel, but also getting very familiar with that autofill feature will speed up productivity and reduce errors. With that being said, thanks again for joining us. I'll see you in the next video. Congrats on completing this video and on your commitment to learning Excel. Be sure to save your work and then pat yourself on the back. You are doing an awesome job.